Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to ReBinge It. This is our Star Trek Prodigy podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim. And we are watching and overanalyzing every episode of Star Trek Prodigy like true Star Trek geeks. Hit it. Well, we are back.
Finally, it's taken only forever.
I mean, we never left. But now Prodigy is back.
We were always here.
Yes, and always podcasting about Star Trek. But now it's on Netflix, which is weird, because I don't know, I've turned Netflix off a long time ago, had to turn it back on.
It worked for Netflix. They got like a subscriber back.
Yeah, they got one back.
Yeah.
Though I guess this comes at a pretty good time because other Trek is over right now, or like Discovery, right? Or It's on hiatus. Doctor Who finished.
We've only got one more season of Lower Decks, which is a travesty.
Yeah, that's annoying. Well, we do have, I guess, Acolyte is on, but like Foundation isn't on right now, and Silo isn't back. So I don't know. And even the Great British Baking Show isn't on yet, which is why I don't have Netflix on.
There's no sci-fi and there's no baking. What is happening to the world?
There's no baking. So I guess it's a good time for Prodigy to reappear.
Yes. And I admit I am resisting binging the whole thing in one go.
Oh, yes, we are going to resist that urge. I mean, I don't generally have that urge, but today we're going to talk about episodes 1 and 2 of season 2, Into the Breach, parts 1 and 2.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, it would probably have been put out as a single episode had it been.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, maybe. I mean, in the first season, they did put out the first 2, right?
Yeah.
As episode 1, sort of. So they maybe would have aired them both together.
Yeah.
And I don't know, going forward, unless the editing is too onerous, this is what we'll do. We'll try to do 2 episodes at a time. And we're going to alternate it with Voyager. So if you came here looking for a Star Trek Voyager podcast, don't worry. We'll do Voyager probably next week, and then we'll go back to Prodigy. So we'll alternate as we try to cover both of these shows at the same time. And it is funny to go back to Voyager and then back to this, back to Voyager, since they're all sort of hitting the same notes. So it's interesting.
Yes, there's an odd feeling of parallel between the two shows.
And of course, now that we're watching Voyager, we're seeing a lot more links between the two shows. But we're only into season 2 of Voyager, so some of those things that are connected to things that happen in later episodes we might not remember. I'm finding I'm remembering very little from my first watch of Voyager. Every now and then I'll go, oh yeah, I remember that. But generally, it's been like a new discovery, which is pretty interesting. The episode titles today, Into the Breach, is interesting because Unto the Breach is one of the best ever episodes of Star Trek. That was one of the Deep Space Nine episodes about the Klingons. I just absolutely loved that episode.
You did.
So it's funny that we have a little link to the title here. So there's the first Easter egg, I guess. So what we're going to do today is we'll walk through the 2 episodes. I did notes on the first episode, James did on the second. So rather than alternating like we used to do, I'll do one episode, full episode, then he'll do the full episode. It's funny to think about, it was 3 years ago when we first did Prodigy.
That's crazy.
So we have been podcasting for 3 years since the show started. So I don't know, we're maybe a little bit more practiced in the way that we do it. So we're not going to do it exactly the same way as we did with season 1.
We're going to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, our plan is to do more analysis and discussion as we go through the episode rather than waiting until the end. So we will talk about, though, at the end, some of the things that stood out. And of course, we'll do a rating. And we thought, too, maybe we would do a little speculating of what we think is coming since we're only going to watch these slowly. I know other people will have already binged all the way to the end so they can laugh at our bad guesses, but that's what we're going to do.
People can have some additional fun mocking us for being completely wrong.
Yeah, no problem. Unfortunately, our kid correspondent, who usually joins us, Mahi, she's currently traveling with her family. So the timing of their vacation doesn't really align with the podcast. And you know what? They didn't ask us for our permission, which it's just a real shame because clearly they should have.
She's a world traveler now.
She is.
And plus, it was so long ago since we had the first season. I mean, she's in college now, right?
Yeah. I think she was 6 when we started. So what? She's like 23 now? I don't know.
It's like, soap opera years. Yeah.
Well, we'll try to catch up with her when she gets back, and maybe we'll just, wherever we are in the process, maybe we'll just have her do a recording to catch us up on what she thinks of the episodes we've covered. I haven't seen Mahi very frequently in the 3 years since this show started or in the time since season 1 ended, but every time I see her, it's the first thing she asks. Where's Prodigy? When is it coming back? When can we start recording? So she's been very eager, and then she goes on a trip. And James and I were joking yesterday that it's been so long, she's probably got her own podcast now, and who knows? All right, before we get started, I'll do a quick reminder. If you want to join the conversation, you can always email us at rebingeit@gmail.com, or you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. And if you put your messages onto the specific posting that asks for feedback, we will try to read it on the podcast if you get it in before we record, or if you send us an email, we'll do that too.
Yes.
I know we normally get audio recordings from Jeff X Force 11, and that just came in this morning, so we will have that today. But those are the ways that you can be a part of this if you want to, or you can just sit back and listen to us talk about this cool show.
Audience participation is optional.
It is. Enough chit-chat?
I think so. I think we should talk about the episode.
All right.
And I'm joined by a cat in the podcast booth who was yelling at the door as loud as physically possible.
Well, good. We'll get some meows on here, so all good.
Well, she does enjoy the sound of her voice.
Because we don't have the Cation yet in this episode, so we have to provide our own Cation.
Yes, we have our own Cation in this episode.
Well, there's no cold open, just the usual theme, and we still see the Protostar and Holo Janeway just to torture us. I'm hoping it means that we're going to find her, at some point. We're going to get Holo Janeway back. That's my hope.
Well, I could go straight into an over-analysis then. The Protostar is in one piece in the future, and the idea is to go into the future and rescue the Protostar and Chakotay, which means you would get Holo Janeway back in the Protostar.
Oh, that would be good. But this episode actually opens in a battle simulation where cadets are not faring well against the drones, but never fear, Murph takes them all down with little effort and a few coups. Oh. He's handed a data pad with a message from Janeway, and he runs out all excited. And I like the woman here who says, I have no idea what he said, but he's a shoo-in for the security track. That was quite cute.
Yeah, he does seem to be quite effective. He's almost as good as Kira.
Or Guinan. She was very good at shooting down the little drone things, remember?
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, she would show up Worf on the holodeck. You don't remember that? Okay.
Nope.
Well, somewhere else, Rocktalk seems to be giving a science presentation when she gets the same message from Janeway, and she's distracted, so she finishes her talk really quickly by saying she figured out how to stop tribbles from multiplying, and she runs out of the room, leaving everybody looking at each other shocked. Very Rocktalk moment. Jankum also gets a message, Zero gets a message, and when Zero gets his message, by the way, he's reading the minds of two young people who seem to like each other but aren't saying it out loud. And it seems that Zero at this point begins this longing for the joys of being corporeal and experiencing physical touch. A little bit like how Data would long to be human. It's something similar going on here with Zero.
I think so.
Then we see Dal is skipping class, so this is our first sign that he may not be Starfleet material after all. I mean, you can't skip class. You're at Starfleet Academy. You wanted desperately to get in here. I think really what Dal wanted, as we find, is he just wanted them to give him a ship and for him to be captain.
Yes. And to fly things.
So he's not in class. He's actually sitting outside watching ships fly around outside. And then he gets the same message from Janeway. And one of the things she says is that she has a mission she believes the 5 of them are uniquely qualified for. And she also says that this will be their study abroad, which is quite funny.
And what popped into my head was, is this mission to cause chaos?
Yeah, then they'd be perfect for it, especially Dal. Now the young crew all meets up with their luggage, and we're waiting for a shuttle to land, and we learn that they haven't actually been seeing much of each other.
Yeah.
And we also learn that Jankum has been taking sonic showers, so I thought that was funny. He's actually maybe clean for the first time, and he's trying to be more polite. So there's a few times in this episode where he says his usual thing, and then he goes, and he backs away and tries to apologize.
Yeah.
I do like that about him.
Personal development.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like the rest of them are kind of embracing this whole experience, but Dal is not. He's just whining. Rocktalk misses Gwen, but Dal says she's probably Queen of Solum by now. And then he calls Starfleet Academy a study snooze fest. Rocktalk, of course, loves it because she loves learning, but Dal thinks that he knows everything already, of course, so he doesn't need to be taught anything. In this scene, I was kind of missing their original outfits. At least this current cadet uniform doesn't make Rocktalk look like she wet herself. Like, remember the first things they put her in last season? But it's so much material because she's so large,
giant.
and it's just peculiar. Now the shuttle arrives to pick them up, and surprise, they are greeted by none other than the EMH from Voyager, who calls himself the hero of the Delta Quadrant. Oh, Robert Picardo. So funny.
I love it. He was one of the great characters of Voyager, so bringing him back into Voyager The Next Generation.
I do agree with Jankum here, though, that he's a poor substitute for Holo Janeway. I mean, I get it. We have the real Janeway, but I like the Holo Janeway.
I also like how almost immediately he starts name-dropping, calling Admiral Janeway Catherine.
Yes. A little familiar.
Yeah. It so fits with what I remember of the end point of the character of the Doctor, so this works well.
I thought the sound was a little bit funny with Robert Picardo for some reason. I didn't think his volume was right. Like, I couldn't hear him. Oh. And I could hear everybody else just fine, but I kept turning it up whenever the Doctor was in a scene.
I did not experience that.
Maybe it's just my ears.
You're not receptive to holograms.
I guess not. We take a ride on the shuttle where we learn the mission is to observe the wormhole created by the destruction of the protostar. The Doctor explains about a message they got from Chakotay that comes from Solum 52 years in the future. He says Solum may be two separate worlds now. The Solum Gwen is on her way to that is peaceful, and the future Solum that's been torn apart by civil war. So a little recap to the end of last season.
Not the last one.
No. And speaking of Doctor Who, Dal says timey-wimey in this scene. He says that the timey-wimey stuff hurts his head. Rocktalk says it sounds like he never read Temporal Mechanics 101.
Which is the start of a running joke.
Yes, it's said to him many times in this episode. But this is where I think we go back to Dal from season 1. He doesn't want to learn anything.
Yeah.
I mean, he even tells Rock, like, oh, I'll leave the science to you. I just want to be captain. It's like, you can't be the dumbest person and then become captain. That's not how it works, not in Starfleet, anyway.
Well, I think my comment to you after watching this was Dal is back to the Fresh Prince of the Delta Quadrant.
He really is. Here we finally learn that we are, of course, joining the new Voyager, which we guessed last season, or at least I remember I guessed.
So I can now call this show Voyager TNG.
It really is. This would have been the absolute ideal place for the Voyager theme song. And we kind of get it, but it's like a weird reworking of it. I had to listen to it multiple times to even hear that the sort of the strains from Voyager were there.
Right.
But I'm not sure why we didn't lean into that a little bit more. Typically, that's what Trek does. We lean into the nostalgia with the music.
Right.
I don't know. It was weird here. We had that the bum bum noise, right? But beyond that, it was definitely different. We learn the new Voyager is a lot bigger than the old one, 29 decks and an 800-plus crew. That is a lot bigger. I think the original Voyager was like 15 decks, and there's 100 and some people on it.
60-something,
yeah.
I think.
And we also learn that Janeway is going to be captain, but I don't know why she's doing that. Let somebody else be captain. You can be the jerky admiral who undermines the captain and then tells everyone what to do and then shifts the blame when everything goes wrong. I mean, what is she doing?
Right. She could have taken the Jellicoe leadership class and just been a complete jerk. Or one of the admirals who would turn up on Deep Space Nine and tell Sisko how to do things.
Yeah, without knowing anything about anything.
Right.
When we're walking through the hallway, we meet some other Academy hopefuls, 3 Nova Squadron candidates. Which, I mean, we paused and started talking to each other about this because this is another example of Starfleet not learning from their mistakes because these elite cadet squadrons, nothing good has come from that.
Nope. Tom Paris in his original incarnation, remember what happened there? Got another one of the pilots killed. Red Squad, probably the worst of the Starfleet youth.
Yes.
Everything we've seen with Starfleet when they have these elite little bands, they turn into Starfleet youth.
Well, what bothers me about it is when people throw fits about the original Roddenberry vision and how, we're straying from it. Typically, when people are complaining about that, they're wrong. They have no idea what they're talking about. But to me, these little squadrons really do stray from that vision. There weren't supposed to be these little elite groups. We weren't supposed to have the little personal conflicts and things that come from having elite groups. And we see it right away. In this scene, we see it. Yeah. So I don't get it. I don't think it's very Star Trek. I get we've done it on a couple of different series, but I don't like it.
Well, they even mock our fearless crew.
Yeah.
And I think it points to an inherent problem if you're creating these elite groups.
Yeah.
You're creating a class system within Starfleet.
Yeah.
Which couldn't be any less Star Trek if you actually tried. I get they want this for the conflict within the story. But I think you could do it in a different way. If you could do it more as not an elite group, but more just personal rivalry.
Well, and then especially when you take this group along on this particular mission, I just don't think it makes sense.
Oh, okay. Overanalysis.
Mm-hmm.
They brought this elite group along.
Right.
Because there may be suicide missions and people need to die.
Oh, their plan was to send them into the wormhole.
Yes. So you send these, so you send these turkeys in because, it doesn't matter if they die. Remember the great Deep Space Nine episode, Valiant?
Oh, yeah.
That's what they're there for.
Cannon fodder.
Exactly. Willing cannon fodder. Valiant, by the way, probably one of the great Deep Space Nine episodes.
Yeah, one of them, to your point, calls our crew Janeway's troublemakers and calls them Never Squadron. I mean, it's just rude. Okay, let's just move on.
Moving on.
Janeway, Dr. Noum, and Atennas walk by and say hi, sort of. Del wants to hear about the mission that they're on, but Janeway is too busy to chat, and she just sort of taps him on the shoulder. Antennas is rude to them.
Independently, we both just called him Antennas in our notes.
I don't know what his name is. He's Antennas in my entire notes. Blue guy, Antennas. Also here, Jankum is painfully polite to Noum, who, remember, was really mean to him, and it seems to completely confuse the guy, which is very funny.
Being polite is not the Tellarite way.
No, so he is really working against his internal programming. Now we follow Janeway and crew to the bridge, where we do get some good Trek music as she admires the new captain's chair, and she sits down and orders the ship out of space dock, so we are on the move.
Yep.
And then our young crew learns about turbo lifts because they didn't have a turbo lift on the Protostar, so that was funny.
Oh, right.
And they also learned that they'll be assigned to their own divisions, so even on the ship, they won't be working closely together. Jankum, of course, is dropped off in engineering, and we learn this new Voyager has a slipstream, and he's all excited about that.
Yep.
Murph is in security training, and he gets a bunch of weapons on a holodeck, and he seems very excited about that. Zero's going to work in sickbay with the doctor, and Rock is assigned to cetacean ops to work with, I guess, the dolphins or the whales or whatever's there, and she's very excited.
The whales having made an appearance in Lower Decks.
Right, in their little Starfleet uniforms. That was quite funny. Now Dal and the EMH are alone, and Dal asks why Janeway said that she needed them in particular on this mission. And the EMH says, she needs everyone on the ship, and this is not what Dal wanted to hear. He also doesn't want to hear that he's going to be in command training, which means he needs to study. So he's dropped off in a room with a bunch of books. And the EMH tells him to start with Temporal Mechanics 101. The joke keeps going.
Yeah.
Then we see the crew later at dinner, and Dal is complaining about learning again. He wants to get to the bridge. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Somebody needs to somehow make it clear to him that he can't just run a starship with 800 people on it. He's bored. He misses being master of his own ship. He's just really whiny in this episode, and it's quite annoying because it's back to the Fresh Prince version.
Yeah. Even Kirk, who was truly the cowboy of Starfleet. He did his training. He learned the rules. He learned how to do the job.
He cheated on the Kobayashi Maru, but he still worked his way up the ranks.
Right, yeah.
Did you notice in this scene that Rok-Tahk was eating a hamburger?
No.
Remember that she didn't know how to eat any other food? In season 1, she only ate whatever it was called, like the gruel.
Yeah, the gruel.
Yeah.
The Dickensian gruel, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought, oh man, there's a nice growth for Rok-Tahk.
Oh, that was a good catch.
Later, Dal calls his long-distance girlfriend, and we see Gwyn for the first time. She's still making her way to Solum, which I guess means it's a very long journey on a slow ship. She picks up right away that Dal is unhappy, and she tells him to give it time, so at least somebody is giving him some advice, which is good.
Yeah.
But then she talks about how nervous she is about what she's trying to do, because what's being asked of her is pretty crazy.
No pressure. You've just got to stop a civil war.
Yep. Dal asks what happens if she gets to Solum and fixes everything, because he's worried that means she'll stop existing.
Yeah.
And she too says he needs to read Temporal Mechanics 101. She tries to explain by saying the past is the past, and that hasn't changed, and what she's hoping to do is to make a new future for Solum. And then he asks her about their future and gets really tongue-tied when she doesn't respond right away. But of course, it turns out that the call is just frozen and the connection drops. That was cute.
Yeah, that was very cute. It also falls into the classic Star Trek. Time travel works when you need time travel to work.
Well, it works the way you need it to work for the story.
If we're trying to be purists on time travel, Miles O'Brien died in the past, yet he was still alive.
Oh, God, we're back to that.
In Visionary, I'm never letting that go.
No, well, I've got one thing in here that I'm never letting go, so that's okay. It'll come up.
Okay.
Over to sickbay, and Zero is wondering again about being able to feel something physically. And the doctor does offer some advice, which Zero accepts. And the doctor says there are opportunities to grow that are different from humanoids, and Zero really hopes that that's true.
Well, the doctor's the perfect person for it. I mean, the doctor is a sentient holographic life form. He can experience the simulation of some physical things, like when the doctor got sick.
Yep.
So he's perfectly placed to give Zero actual real advice.
Yeah, I mean, they're not exactly the same thing, obviously, and they don't have the same problem. But I think what the doctor points out is that everybody's different and we all evolve in our own way. And that's a good message, even as a kid's show, right, to give to humans, because it's true. Janeway calls telling the doctor that she has news about their mission, which turns him into a nervous wreck, where he refers to Shuttle Bay 3 and then says, we only have 2 shuttle bays, haha, and he leaves. It's very suspicious, and Zero picks up on it right away.
Yeah.
So Zero then goes to tell Dal that he was right. The Admiral really is hiding something. And this is something that throughout this episode and the next episode really annoyed me.
Yeah.
It's not that the Admiral is hiding something. It is the Admiral's job to know what things should be told to the crew and to only tell them things that need to be told to everybody. So this just keeps irritating me, this thing of, she's hiding something or she's lying. I'm like, no, she's the Admiral. That's not the same thing.
And just as the commander of the ship, she doesn't need to tell everybody everything.
No, it ends up being something that can be demotivating because it can confuse people. It's like you don't do that specifically because you want people to remain motivated and focused on their tasks. It is her job to worry about things.
Yeah.
That sounds dumb, but that is a part of leadership. It is your job to worry about stuff so that other people don't have to.
Question here. Are missions typically open in a ship in Starfleet?
I don't know. They probably are.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen in all other treks that there are frequently other layers to the mission that are not out in the open. But there's still things that have to be accomplished, or sometimes the captain has something specific that an admiral has asked them to do. So they're not always 100% open.
Yeah.
But where they're going, and maybe the overall arc is visible to everybody, but not on a ship of 800 people. I mean, is this a ship of families like the Enterprise? Because that's a lot of people.
I made the assumption it was, because there's also the mention of the schools that are on the ship.
Oh, right.
So I think it is a ship in the vein of the Enterprise.
Yeah, okay. Zero believes that there is more to this mission than they know, and it's all happening in Shuttle Bay 3. So Dal has a plan, of course. I think he says a cockamamie plan. And they start sneaking to the Jeffries tubes, and they pick up Jankum along the way, who says a secret shuttle bay will have restricted access, but Dal says that's what the Jeffrey tubes were made for. Another example of terrible security in Starfleet.
Yep.
Rock and Murph then run into them just as they're about to climb into the Jeffries tube. Dal says Janeway's hiding something and they're going to find out what it is, which is so dumb. I'm sure
it falls under the classic kids adventure, though.
Okay. Like the Goonies or something.
Exactly.
Rock says she doesn't want to be involved, but she ends up going along anyway. And as they're walking through the tubes, Zero figures out there really is no Shuttle Bay 3, but there is a retrofitted hangar with restricted access. Not that restricted. So they head there, and they find a big empty shuttle bay. They don't see anything interesting there, but eventually, after I shouted like 10 times, they figure out there's actually a cloaked ship right in front of them.
They must have heard you.
Jankum points out that cloak ships are illegal in Starfleet, and they wonder what it's doing there. But before they can figure it out, in comes the bridge crew, and we see our young crew hanging from the ceiling. They've managed to get up to the ceiling with Murph before anybody sees them.
Murph, once again, very useful.
Janeway comes in to say, we have a problem. And Dr. Noum, guesses that Admiral Jellicoe, who we all know is a jerk, well-known jerk in Star Trek.
He's Starfleet's preeminent jerk.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Noum guesses that Admiral Jellicoe has pulled the plug on their covert operation, so the jerky admirals continue to be jerky. Janeway decloaks the ship, which is called Infinity, and she says, the Admiral fears the wormhole is growing unstable and the entire timeline is at risk, so he's concerned about losing any more officers.
That's what they brought Nova Squad for.
Right. Up on the ceiling, Dal figures out that this mission isn't about observing the wormhole, but going through it. And Jankum then notices that the Infinity is an experimental Federation support courier with a temporal shield emitter. Interesting.
Where did they get that tech from? Is this borrowed from the Borg?
Murph starts to drool, at least I think that's what happens, and some goo falls to the floor right next to Antenna's foot, but he doesn't notice. And Atennas does say he's only going to follow Admiral Janeway's orders, not anyone else. Although we have some evidence from last season that isn't necessarily true when they threw her in the brig, remember, and called her too emotional.
Atennas only says that when he's trying to suck up to Janeway.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, all right.
He seems like a suck up.
That, by the way, is the thing that I'm never going to forget. I won't forget how many times we called Janeway emotional in season 1. Janeway says they're not going to leave until she convinces Starfleet Command it's the right thing to do. So she says, be ready for launch. Murph drools again, and some more goo falls next to Antenna's foot. This time he sees it, but he thinks the ship is leaking, which is so funny because it's not under the ship. So it's like projectile leaking is his theory.
Yeah. And if this experimental ship you're about to go on a mission in is leaking, I think you'd want to get people in there right away.
Yeah, well, except it's a secret, right? He says he'll get somebody to look at it, but how many people are in on this part of the mission?
Good point.
But you need engineers.
You'd need to have a servicing and engineering crew there. What if something went wrong? What if it started projectile leaking?
This is a new thing, projectile leaking.
Yeah.
Well, they turn the cloak back on and leave, and Dal says, this just got interesting. At the end.
This so far, I think, has been incredibly on brand for Dal.
Yeah, it does feel like we slipped back to season 1 Dal, but it also wouldn't necessarily be believable if all of a sudden he was the greatest student ever, right? And was super studious.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like they spent a lot of time evolving him in the last season, so you would think you would have at least seen a little of that humility that he learned, but it looks like we're going to have to learn humility again.
That will be the recurring theme with Dal.
Yeah.
He keeps on having to relearn tempering his character flaws.
Yeah, he reboots every season. Back to the Fresh Prince. Well, that wraps up episode 1.
Yes, so we'll move right on to episode 2.
Okay.
We open with Gwyn on the shuttle to Solum, and she's being true to form as an overachieving student studying first contact protocols. And there's a joke about how she studied them more than even Picard.
But she doesn't know who Picard is. It's a weird joke.
Oh, I expect Gwyn to have gone through pretty much most of Starfleet history by now. She is the overachieving student.
Yeah, that's probably true. I love her outfit in this scene. It's very purple.
And the patterning on her shoulders looks like the heirloom.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it.
Gwyn is also very stressed because she's got a civil water stop that virtually destroys her civilization and, even worse, saddles them with Chakotay 50 years in the future. We get a great view of Solum at its peak, and do we need to mention confident in our supremacy?
Oh, man. Lies and hypocrisy.
Now, this bit's kind of strange because she just beams down.
Right in the middle.
Yeah. And begins a I come from the stars routine.
Yeah.
Is that how they normally do first contact?
I agree. I thought that was crazy. I do think there are times where it's like they're 30-minute episodes and we got to do things quickly, because certainly what we saw in some of the other shows is we would see covert operations where they would learn a little bit more about the place before they would make contact. But I mean, if we think about what the Vulcans did on Earth, they just turned up, right?
That's true. They just landed near a bar and said, hey, drinks are on us. Her speech seems to work, and she's taken to the elders of Solum. And she then gives her speech about how they're not alone in the universe and how they could be part of a bigger community and Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, Asencia
Tahani.
Kim will never let that go.
No, she'll always be Tahani to me.
Well, Asencia has already arrived and portrayed Gwendala as a spy sent by their enemies. She also has Dreadnought with her and shows a projection of the destroyed Solum.
And they all go,
She is being wonderfully evil.
Oh, I'm so happy she's back.
Yeah.
She is a really good evil character. I'm glad that we found her so quickly, right? That we ran into her right away.
She was straight out in the open.
Yeah, and she's right into her deviousness. it was just all really good. I also loved the look of this scene.
Yes.
Everything. I mean, yes, there was a lot of purple. This is a very purple heavy show, but the costumes, or whatever you call them in animation, the costumes that the characters are wearing, it's so cool. There's lots of bright colors. There's lots of headgear with really sharp corners on it. Yep. It's very ornate. It is really beautiful.
Oh, yeah. It's a great look. Also in this scene, we're introduced to Asencia's younger self.
Who does not look thrilled to be there.
No, she does not.
She's like, my mom is so weird.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
Unfortunately, Asencia seems to have the ear of the elders, and they are not convinced Gwen is who she says she is, and she's forced to flee in a great escape and chase scene. She tries calling the runabout, but things just keep on getting worse.
Oh, yeah.
As the shuttle reports, 2 Vanakat warships are attacking it, and we see it's destroyed.
That was not cool.
Do we want to talk here about why the Vanakat have warships that can detect and destroy a Starfleet shuttle when they're a race that's not interested in the stars?
Yeah, I was wondering that too. But this is something else that annoyed me, is that we didn't appear to have at all considered the fact that Tahani would be here when we got here. And that is unforgivable.
Yeah.
We had to know this was exactly where she was going. We knew this is where she was going.
Right.
Why would Gwen not think this is where she was going? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we were unprepared, which is, I don't get it.
At the end of the day, it is her home. And as the diviner said, in this time period, Solum is at its peak. Of course she's going to go back there.
Yeah, exactly. I did think in this scene when Gwen is giving her speech, she is clearly a bit awkward, doesn't know exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
And I like that, right? Because she's still pretty young and she's never had to do something like this before. So she doesn't adapt very well to what goes on, and she just sort of tries to keep saying the thing that was already prepared and that she'd been practicing. I like that. I thought that was a good touch.
Yeah. It stayed consistent with the age of Gwen and her experience.
Yeah.
Do you think Asencia has broken the temporal prime directive? She has 50 years of tech and Starfleet tech, and she could have stored it all in Dreadnought. So they now have access to advanced technology, warp technology.
Yeah, almost certainly.
So she used that to give the Vanakat the ability to attack and destroy the Starfleet shuttle.
Yeah. And she also knew that this is how they would come in, right? That they would just come in with Gwen.
Oh.
I think, she knew that too. She was in Starfleet long enough to know that.
Oh, she would know the first contact protocols. Oh.
Right. And she probably still has access to it. I mean, she probably downloaded a bunch of stuff to her little robot guy.
It was nice to see Dreadnought back. Off to Janeway on Voyager, the Next Generation, and they've arrived at the wormhole, or the unstable time rift. They seem to interchange what they call it. Roktok is now annoyed that they've told her about the secret shuttle bay and the cloaked ship, bemoaning that she's now an accomplice. Roktok just wants to follow the rules.
Yeah, she doesn't want to ruin this. I mean, she was the one with the most tragic backstory, if we remember. And so, she doesn't want to ruin what she now has.
Yeah.
Especially since she's doing so well. Whereas Dal doesn't care. He doesn't like it. He's a bad friend.
We get to see one of the Starfleet youth members again, the young Vulcan, and she's being nosy. Dal puts her off, and they head off into a Jeffries tube to find out more about what's going on. On the bridge, we see that Voyager is parked up in front of the wormhole, and all of a sudden a glowing sphere appears in front of Voyager. And I really like the ships and the space animations in the show. It just looks beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
If they're given a chance to use saturated colors, they turn the dial up to 11.
Yeah.
Well, the anomaly, which appears to be like a glowing white ball, hails Voyager, and a voice says, "You cannot go. All will be lost. Janeway, do not enter the anomaly." And I thought that sounded like the diviner.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know who it was.
Yeah.
I actually thought it sounded a little bit, at least the way it spoke, I thought it sounded a little bit like Dal.
Oh, interesting.
But we will see.
We'll save that for Speculation Corner. The other thing I liked here is the way Janeway replies with, "We have no intention of entering the wormhole. Pause. At this time."
Yeah. Don't ask me in an hour.
Oh, Janeway, clearly she has embraced being an admiral in Starfleet.
Yep.
But before they can get an answer as to who or what this thing is, it just disappears. And on cue, Dal falls through the grating in the ceiling where he's been hiding in the Jeffries tube, snooping on what's going on. Atennas unceremoniously throws him off the bridge. But because Dal has no chill, he blurts out about Shuttle Bay 3. Well, the Doctor reappears and informs the young crew that Janeway wants to see all of them.
You're in trouble.
Oh, Roktok's going to be so upset at that. Back on Solum, and Gwyn is evading her pursuers and unexpectedly starts to glow in that way the Vanakat do on her face.
Mm-hmm.
Have we seen Asencia do that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
She doesn't have any friends, though.
Oh, that's true.
So I don't know if that's what makes it glow. Those guys who are chasing her, again, another example of a cool costume.
Yes, that sort of the headgear and the robes, and they're carrying some sort of pike or spear.
This scene where they're not exactly chasing her through the street. She's managing to evade them while they look for her. But this actually did have a little bit of a Star Wars feel to it.
Oh.
It wasn't the sort of usual when we're down on a planet in Star Trek with people in rags and mud huts. It wasn't quite that. But, being chased with the big staffs, that just reminded me of Star Wars a little bit.
Star Wars Rebels or the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
Oh, Gwyn is Omega.
Oh, I don't know what that means.
So Gwyn makes her way to the observatory, meeting a very young diviner and immediately introducing herself as your daughter.
She's not technically his daughter.
Well, technically, she's a clone.
She's a clone, so technically she's him, right?
Hi, I'm you. You cloned me. Yourself. You cloned yourself. We're the same person.
Yeah, we're the same person.
What made her go to the observatory? Did she know her father was there?
I think it was the glowing was taking her there.
Oh.
Like she had some sort of a sense that because she says something along the way like, it can't be.
Yeah.
So I think that she was being drawn there because of her father. That's what I picked up.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. Off to the observation deck, and Janeway is giving Dal and the crew an off-the-record, a little bit of a dressing down. But she does show them a video of Chakotay, which gives a recap of the Vanakat capturing him and turning the protostar into a weapon, and how he sent the ship back through the rift. Chakotay also calls Janeway by her fur name.
Her fur name?
Fur name. Her furry name.
Oh, no. I do not want to know that.
Well, Chakotay also calls Janeway by her first name, saying, I'm doing this for you.
Ugh, Chakotay.
We get some more exposition as Janeway explains the mission is to try and rescue him. The time rift is fixed on Solum 52 years in the future, and they can't go in until after Chakotay launches the protostar, which will happen in 41 hours' time. Rok-Tahk explains to Dal this is a classic time paradox and repeats the running joke of Dal not reading Temporal Mechanics 101.
I'm with Dal on this, though. I don't understand why this would impact them, but what Gwen does wouldn't. It's very confusing.
Right. It's kind of like cause doesn't have any effect.
Well, because she says they have to get there after he launches it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would cause this paradox, but I don't know. Timey-wimey and Dal and we're on the same page.
But Gwyn's going to cause a paradox if she stops the timeline from happening anyway.
Yeah, somehow that's different, because we need to read Temporal Mechanics 101.
Yes. Temporal Mechanics 101 clearly states, whatever the story needs, that's how the timeline works.
I'll need to ask Good Aaron on Twitter.
Oh, yes.
Can you explain this to me? Like I'm Dal, isn't that what he says?
Yes, Dal does say that. That was another great line from him. Explain it like I'm Dal. Being solid, loyal people, the young crew agreed to keep this a secret until Janeway makes a call.
I like Dal saying that Chakotay saved us. Like he finally realizes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they all realize that.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, they all realize
the events he set in motion changed their lives.
Right.
On Solum, Gwen and her future father, clone, dad, seem to be getting on well. And she explains her mission is to stop the Civil War. The visuals, I'm going to bring it up again. They are great. Yeah. The observatory scene is really good because you've got the stuff hanging from the ceiling and the two of them talking. Again, beautiful animation and backdrops. The design of this show is spectacular.
Yeah, it's very cool with the big planets hanging over them.
The diviner does have some doubts about Gwen's story, but she demonstrates by using her heirloom and making his hold exactly the same patterns, telling him, it's the same heirloom. He passed it down to her, his progeny. And we get the progeny again.
Yes. Can't we do a DNA test? I don't get it.
Yeah.
And she also says a thing in this scene about how he's the one who taught her all the languages of these different planets. And again, I thought that these guys were isolationists. So how did they even know the languages of the other planet? I
assume all of that was after Tars Lamora.
Oh, okay.
You know, where he was bringing together all these different races to work as slaves in his mine.
Oh, okay.
Gwyn asks him if he'll help, and he says he will. And it's really quite touching when he says, refuse to help my own daughter? Surely I don't make that bad a father, do I?
Well, turns out.
I don't want to have to be the one who tells him. This version of the diviner actually seems like quite a likable fellow.
Yeah, well, it was all the time probably spent alone and all the different things he had to do and,
He also brings up Solom's view of the universe as well, as he describes himself as a lonely astronomer on a planet that cares nothing about the stars.
Yeah. It can't be the whole planet.
Well, maybe it's just a tiny minority of people. Like, he's one of the few who's interested in astronomy and life beyond Solom.
He had to start a podcast. I bet he'd get some listeners.
Well, there you go. It is also kind of sad because you see this sort of young, positive character, and what we've seen in the first season is the diviner, who's cynical and scarred by this civil war. It's a sad future for this guy. The diviner,
the pre-diviner,
takes Gwyn to the Arcanum, which is a reliquary of their history and knowledge. She needs help and asks the lawkeeper, who's another dreadnought, for help.
Library dreadnought.
Library, yes. Well, she asks for help and learns of the Valura, the most ancient rite of all of Solom, and those who succeed are recognized as true Vanukat.
Oh no, a dangerous trial.
Naturally, this does not come free, as it's described as a dangerous ceremony from our earliest origins, and it's not been tried in a millennia. The not the diviner yet tells Gwyn it would prove she's one of us. Then they'd have to listen. And helpfully, the lawkeeper adds, if you survive.
Yeah.
It was a nice touch when the lawkeeper walks in and Gwyn is immediately in defense mode.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, it's a dreadnought.
She gets her weapon out, yeah. But then turns out it's just librarian dreadnought. Although librarian dreadnought does have some comic timing there at the end. If you survive.
Yeah.
But this is like, I don't know, how many times have we seen this? You just have to survive this trial. It's like in every show.
Oh, yeah, it's a popular thing. On Voyager, Dal and the young crew are openly gabbing about being part of a classified Starfleet mission.
Oh my God, 20 seconds ago, Janeway said, can I trust you with this secret? Well, the answer should have been no, you can't. Because we walked out of the door and started talking about it out in the open, and now everybody knows.
Rule 1 of classified missions, Dal.
Oh, Dal.
You don't talk about classified missions.
This is why you're not the captain.
And this is why he's not going to get into Section 31.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, as he's so gabby, the Starfleet Youth Vulcan overhears and orders the other members of Nova Squad to the restricted hangar, into a chase scene where there's a rush to get to the shuttle bay before the Vulcan and Nova Squad get there. And there's a funny turbo lift scene where she's trying to go to one place and people keep on getting
I loved that. It's like she's at Macy's going up in the elevator trying to get to the shoe department. I mean, that was so... If they had just played elevator music, it would have been priceless. Yes. There was also a really cute little detail when the young crew got off the turbo lift and Rock had to just turn just slightly to get out the door.
Oh.
I like that little detail.
Well, they make it in time before Nova Squad, and Dal finds the control panel on the cloaked ship, which fortunately has the usual level of Starfleet security protocols, i.e. none. Now on board the Infinity, Dal has the great idea of flying the ship out to another shuttle bay to keep it from being discovered. But it's too late. The Starfleet youth have arrived, and of course, Nova Squad are complete jerks. A scuffle ensues, and the Vulcan neck pinches Jankum.
Yeah.
Who falls face first onto the control panel, powering up the ship and engaging the Janeway wormhole launch sequence. As the shuttle takes off under impulse, the others are pushed out the back of the entry ramp, leaving just Jankum, Dal, the Vulcan, and Zero on board. And on the bridge, Antenna reports unauthorized access in Shuttle Bay 3 as the glowing ball appears again, saying, Janeway, time is now. Janeway starts saying they have no intention of entering the wormhole as the Infinity starts flying into the anomaly. She orders a tractor beam, but it's too late. They're gone. On the Infinity, they're caught in the wormhole's gravimetric well, and Zero, being the smart one, grabs a console and buckles up, and they head into the wormhole. Dramatic end.
Well, it is interesting that that ball appeared and said, now's the time. And that is exactly when the shuttle or whatever this new ship, the Infinity is, went into the wormhole. So that's interesting.
The glowing ball, if it is from the future, it should have gone like maybe about 10 minutes before and said, secure your shuttle bay.
Well, but my point is it says the time is now just when the thing goes in there.
Yeah, but if it's trying to stop them from going.
But I don't think it was. The ball said the time is now.
Oh.
And that's just when they went in.
So you think it was wanting them to go in, telling them that this was the time to go in?
That's how I read it as a possibility. Could I also, before we get there, throw a speculation corner out?
Okay, go.
What if it's Holo Janeway and she's now like a prophet in the wormhole?
Wow.
She's like, don't go in now. Okay, now go in.
That would be awesome. Holo Janeway as a prophet in her own wormhole.
I mean, could we be slightly biased because we just finished recently watching all of Deep Space Nine? Maybe.
Could it be biased because I'm a huge fan of Deep Space Nine and love the prophets?
Yes. In fact, I'm surprised you didn't make that suggestion before I did.
So Janeway, Holo Janeway is a prophet in her own wormhole. I am so down with that.
Before we go into our other topics here, I do need to make my last complaint.
You have a complaint.
You're telling me anyone can open the door to get into the hangar bay. Anyone can open the door to get onto this super top secret cloaked shuttle.
Yep.
Anyone can just bang their head on the panel and cause this mission to launch.
And
I mean,
anyone can open and get into a Jeffries tube that lead all over the ship and have convenient gratings where you can listen to private conversations.
This is silly even for Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek does some silly things, but I am not particularly happy with that entire sequence of events.
I will point out from season 1 of Deep Space Nine, they have open Ethernet ports everywhere.
But that's Deep Space Nine. It's not a Starfleet ship. And many times on that show, we talked about that. Like, oh, this would be different on the Enterprise, or this would be different on a ship.
They wouldn't even have passwords on the Starfleet ship.
I mean, it doesn't even entirely make sense that they would bring those elitist Nova Squadron kids along who are, and you know the Vulcan in particular is going to be Miss Rule Follower who's going to call home and, and tell on them immediately. And they bring them onto this ship where there is a covert mission. They know it's a covert mission. Why would you bring anyone on who would risk exposing it?
I think I have a reason for that. The Vulcan is a super suck-up, and number 1 on her fast dial list on her phone is Admiral Jellicoe.
But Admiral Jellicoe knows about it.
Yes. But he wants to make sure Janeway's doing it his way.
Oh, so he put her there, you think?
Yeah.
Oh, God, that guy's a jerk, if that's the case. I mean, that's already established.
I have another possible as well. Mm-hmm. They do bring up how Picard is carrying out his Quixodian rescue of the Romulans.
Mm-hmm.
So large numbers of ships are tied up in that.
Oh, that's true.
They are hurting for crew. So they're pulling in, like Stacy said, they told us everybody's got to go today.
Another Star Wars reference, yeah.
And they're pulling in anyone who's half competent. So they're they're using what resources they have. So that's why they're on the ship.
Okay. I do buy that Jellicoe would put somebody on there to report back to him and tell him what's going on. And this is the perfect group to do that, these suck-up kids.
Report back to him personally to make sure everybody's just doing things. Yeah, he's a micromanager.
Yeah. I don't think we know the name of that Vulcan character yet from Nova Squad, who's now stuck on the ship with Dal going into the wormhole. I mean, those two are not going to get along. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a Vulcan, that's got to be the definition of hell.
Yeah, totally undisciplined, nothing but emotion, Dal.
Yes.
All right, so we reached the end of the 2 episodes. Let's talk about what stood out. What do you have on your list?
Okay, the visual look of this show is breathtaking.
Agreed.
I really enjoy the animation. I mean, I'm an animation fan. Anybody who listened to our first season knows I gush about the animation in this show. I would say the first part, not so much, but the second part, they really embrace it again.
Agreed. It was much more prominent in the second episode once they got to Solum. Yeah. The colors and the visuals were absolutely incredible. I totally agree.
I also feel that the first part was very much a setup episode.
It was, yeah. Reintroduced our characters. Yeah. We got a little bit of the story from the end of the previous season. Yeah, it was.
And at the same time, the second one just jumped us right back into Prodigy.
Yeah, into things happening quickly. Yep.
Yeah. The other thing I think that stood out for me was the portrayal of the diviner.
The pre-diviner.
The pre-diviner. I really like the fact that they showed this character as somebody likable.
He's a little bit more like Gwen, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And would make sense, actually.
Right.
It really stands out that Dal is back to being annoying and selfish. And we talked about it a few times. And that's, the Fresh Prince is back. And I didn't like him that way at all. So
no, you did not.
I would have to relearn all those lessons. But let's hope that he calms down a little bit. I think now that he's, stuck in the wormhole, he doesn't have the opportunity to just be complaining about everything that's going on Voyager, which is good. That stood out to me because I didn't really like it. I definitely still love Jankum. He's still got the same sense of humor, but the way he would go, that was rude. I mean, cracked me up. Love Jankum.
He remains consistent even if he's trying to change.
Yeah, he does. Jason Mantzoukas just continues to be a revelation to me in Star Trek, which I never would have expected. I absolutely love that character. I think their cadet uniforms are still a little bit strange. They look good on everybody, really, except for Roktak. They don't look right on her. I hope they figure that out, but that's a little weird. The one last thing I have in the stood out list is you would think that the Jeffries tubes would have like locks or warning bells or something, but you know what? Star Trek tells us no, it doesn't. This is just what happens.
Access codes for certain parts. I mean, you could speculate that Dal is a little bit of a rogue, so maybe has the access codes for all the panels.
Yeah, it's possible. If he was, but I mean, he didn't do any studying to figure out how to break in and get anything like that. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an inconsistency, but I see why they need it for a story.
Yeah, I understand. I agree that episode 1 was definitely an intro rather than doing, a big bang to get us going. It was like, we had some nostalgia because we brought back the Doctor, we brought back Voyager. We reintroduced the reasons that we were there and kind of what happened. And so there wasn't a lot of stuff that happened in that episode.
No.
But I still enjoyed it, right? Because I enjoyed coming back to Prodigy. Yeah. But episode 2, I had a lot of things that annoyed me in that episode. And I hope that we explain some of those things. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I
just rolled with it.
I didn't like the constant thing of Janeway's lying and keeping stuff from us. That is literally her job. I just thought they'd just sort of keep repeating that and that nobody even says that. I don't know. That was annoying.
I think that's part of Dal's inexperience. And
I guess so.
The flaw with Dal. He doesn't understand these things.
And then there's that scene that really funny scene where the Vulcan Nova Squad kid is going in the turbo lift and she stops a person from getting on. And that person had 2 pips. Why would she be able to stop that person from getting on the elevator?
Oh, because people know that she's a Jellicoe suck-up.
They're like, I don't want to be in the elevator with that kid.
Oh, Jellicoe spies here.
The fact that they didn't even consider that Tahani was going to be on Solon when they got there is ridiculous.
Is that like Asencia?
Yes. Why? Of course that's where she went, and we didn't even prepare Gwen for the possibility. That's crazy. So I thought that was a real weakness in the story. Because that makes no sense to me.
Well, what's crazy about that is you could write that whole thing off with one line. There's no indication that Asencia made it here.
Yeah, one line. Exactly. Or we've been monitoring, right? But we haven't seen her. Mm-hmm.
She hasn't appeared. There's no sign she's here.
But it turns out they didn't do anything. They weren't monitoring it because she was there.
Right. And then when Gwen arrives, it's like, oops.
Is someone going to check on that poor shuttlecraft person who got killed? Or whatever that ship was? I hope somebody goes, oh.
Red shirt.
Yeah, the red shirt's gone. I don't know. I had some gripes about episode 2, so I'm anxious to go on to the next episode and hopefully enjoy it a little bit more.
I feel I was much more forgiving.
You can be more forgiving, though it depends. It depends on... Usually I get annoyed about very specific things, but I don't know. I thought it was unforgivable they weren't prepared for the Vindicator to be there. That's crazy.
I feel bad for Gwen. They kind of dropped her in.
They dropped her in with no protection and no backup plan if things went wrong. It's like, I don't know. And then, of course, Jankum hits his head and the thing launches. I mean...
Well, that... Okay,
it's a bit goofy to me.
I will defend that. If you remember, right before that, Dal was powering the ship up.
He was.
So he was actually doing something to the ship. So maybe he put the ship inadvertently into pre-launch mode.
And we only have super security when the story needs it, which is crazy.
Correct.
Again, it's a covert mission. It has to be exactly timed. So you are going to put a lock on something. I just think somebody banging their head is not going to launch it.
And most importantly, on that large launch button, you have a "Are you sure?"
Yes, where's the "Are you sure?" button? Oh, that's funny.
Accept
I
or
mean,
decline.
I get it. They're kind of playing on a joke that happened in the previous season, right? Where I don't remember if it was Jankum or if it was Murph. Somebody hit the panel and they launched a torpedo, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to some speculation.
Okay.
The first thing I have in my speculation list is I'd like Holo Janeway to be a prophet in the wormhole, which we already talked about.
That is awesome.
And we talked a little bit about whose voice was it telling them not to enter, and then the time is now. It could have been Janeway, could have been Chakotay, but I really, my current speculation is it was Dal. Who do you think it was? Or
I thought it sounded like the Diviner.
That's interesting.
Because I'll speculate the Diviner finds out what happens to himself.
Oh, interesting.
And then chooses a different path and tries to warn Janeway.
That could change everything. I mean, we talked about, I think maybe in the last episode of season 1, that Gwen going to Solum could cause this whole thing, right? Could cause the Civil War. Mm-hmm.
That would be my next point, that I think Gwen and Asencia are going to cause a civil war.
Yeah. I mean, that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
My last thing in my speculation list is, do you think that this whole season now will be about trying to get them back, trying to get Dal back, and that they'll be separated into these 3 different groups for the whole season?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
I think there'll be 3 separate storylines. I also have a speculation about that storyline. We're going to see a 52 years later Gwen.
That's a great speculation. I love that. I remember the first time we saw the Vindicator Tahani character, I thought it was Gwen.
Yeah.
But, because they do look sort of similar. But that's actually a really cool idea, that what they'll get there, and that's what will help them get back, will be Gwen will be there. Genius. I like that speculation.
I have another speculation as well.
Okay. You're much better at speculating than I am, mostly because I just like to watch it and see what happens.
Chakotay says he was doing this for you, Catherine. He's doing it because in the original timeline, Janeway tries to go back and is killed.
Oh, interesting.
What happens in the timeline before this gets messed up is she goes through in the shuttle, the Vonokat end up killing her.
Oh, and that's the reason for the bubble voice and everything. Okay. I think that's a really good guess.
That would then make the bubble Chakotay.
Yeah. Maybe on the other hand, then, what if Chakotay was actually talking about a different Catherine? He's got a different girlfriend somewhere named Catherine. This is for you, Catherine. And Janeway's like, oh, isn't that nice that he's talking about me? No, it's really Catherine Smith.
The captain of a California-class ship that he's been dating.
All right, do you have any other speculation you would like to talk about?
Other speculation. Young Asencia does not agree with the older Asencia's position.
I really hope that happens. I do. I hope baby Tahani is on the other side, because she's like, I am so weird when I grow up. I do not like that person.
Oh, I think that would be great.
That would be hilarious. I don't think that's what will happen, but I think that would be awesome.
And maybe a speculation for the whole season. I don't think the Diviner makes it again.
Oh, no. You think he's going to die twice?
Yep.
Oh, poor Gwen. He may sacrifice himself to save Solum this time instead of just for Gwen.
Maybe speculation here. The Vonokat have this whole thing we've been learning about with, true Vonokat, and you do this ritual to show you're a Vonokat. Well, if you all share the same DNA, wouldn't that make you all Vonokat? Or is this some kind of hierarchical class society?
I don't know. Because just do a DNA test.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Why do we have to do a trial?
Is this just a cultural thing, or is it actually...
That's what I think. I think it's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. You got to prove it.
Yeah.
It's like a duel.
If you survive.
Okay, let's look at some of the feedback we got. One piece of feedback on the Facebook group is from Joyce. Joyce says, Prodigy, fast-paced as usual, even so, still surprised at how quickly Gwen met up with her father and the team already going through the wormhole.
Yes, there was no messing around.
Annoyingly, though, Dal is back to being his early season 1 self. Yes, exactly. Side note, binged the show in 5 days. You're in for a treat. Thank you for not spoiling it. I really appreciate that, and I'm very glad you enjoyed it. And then the other feedback we got was, of course, from Jeff X-Force 11, so let me play that.
Well, hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff, X-Force 11, leaving my feedback about Prodigy Into the Breach Parts 1 and 2. Man, it is so good to be back with our crew, and it just makes it even better that we're on the Voyager A and we get the Doctor. It was so hard just to watch these 2 episodes, but I'm committed to being deliberate through my watch because I really want to savor this, and I hope Netflix gives us a 3rd, 4th, 5th season. But on to the episodes. I was very skeptical about why Janeway brought this group on board the Voyager A, because I was thinking, yeah, she's going to get them to go where she can't. And that was not the case, but they ended up going anyway. But it's also interesting, too, the dynamic with Gwen, because I was wondering how they're going to work out this season. And now it seems she's thrown in where she's not being fully accepted and she's going to have to fight to get her voice heard. And I am just absolutely loving this season so far. I've missed this crew. And for me, this still cements it that this is the number 2 Star Trek show out there right now, just behind Strange New Worlds. But it is so good, and I can't wait to go on this journey with you all. All right, X-Force is out.
Thank you, Jeff. I think I share most of his sentiments.
I love the positivity of Jeff. Very happy to have his input anytime. Yeah. The only thing he's wrong about is that the show is better than Strange New Worlds.
Oh, I'll tie it with Strange New Worlds.
Look, I loved season 2 of Strange New Worlds. I did not like season 1. I just thought it was repetitive. And a lot of people have yelled at me about that. But season 2 was great.
Oh, season 2 was fantastic.
Yeah. I also understand you sort of want to binge it, but at the same time, I want to enjoy it. I want to savor it. And we've had this conversation many times that sort of the hype of something really dies very quickly when you release everything at one time, even though some people get frustrated when you don't release it all at once. But, you know, the hype dies down super fast and people watch all the way to the end and things get spoiled for you if you're just trying to enjoy it. So I'm with you on that. Part of me is the same. It's like, oh, I love it. I want to keep watching. But the other part is like, well, I don't want to ruin it for myself. I want to take my time and enjoy it. I also want, when we're doing the podcast, I don't want to be watching way to the end and then coming back and trying to remember what it felt like when I didn't know what was going to happen.
I'm in agreement with that. With new shows like this that are just coming out, that we've been waiting a while for, if they release them weekly, I love it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that is it for speculation, feedback. I guess it just leaves rating. Do you want to give a single rating for the 2 episodes or a rating per episode?
Well, we could go either way, but it doesn't make a difference.
Uh-oh. Are you going to say 10?
Yes. Thoroughly enjoyable. I really enjoyed both episodes. I am prepared to live with the mistakes in this episode.
That's funny. So you give a 10 to both?
10 to both. I enjoyed both of them. I mean, in some ways, episode 1 was kind of like an extended previously on.
True. Yeah, true.
I think you have to watch them as 2 episodes together, would be my opinion. Thoroughly enjoyable. I'll give it a 10.
If you are new to our podcast, James's enthusiasm may be new to you. James gave a lot of 10s, I think, in season 1. I gave a few. I know that the supernova episodes at the end got a 10 for me. But,
that was a 10 and a half. That was great.
I am a little bit more, I don't know, picky. What is the word for what I am? My standards are different. I don't know. But you tend to really accept, enjoy, and savor the things that you like. And I so appreciate that about you. That, for some reason, is not me. But I enjoyed both of these episodes. I'm really happy to have Prodigy back.
Yep.
I would probably give out of 10. I would give episode 1 maybe like a 6, maybe a 7. Because it really was just an extended previously on, but I was very happy to have the characters back. In the second episode, I thought absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And I like that we quickly got to Voyager. We quickly got to the wormhole. We quickly got into the wormhole, right? Yep. So, really fast things were happening. But there really were, I thought, my own personal opinion, don't everybody freak out, but I really thought there were some weaknesses in the story, which I have already outlined, so I'm not going to go over them again. So I'll give episode 1 a 7. I'll give episode 2 a 6.
Okay.
I don't know. The episode 2 there were so many things that did not work for me in that episode. including the projectile leaking, which was quite weird. What is going on?
You were annoyed by Chakotay appearing.
Well, okay. Yeah. If you would like to hear why I do not like Chakotay, please listen to our ReBinge It podcast, ReBinge Star Trek Voyager.
Yes.
Okay, that wraps us up, I believe. And unless you have something else.
No, I think that wraps up a great start to a beautifully animated show and just a really cool piece of Trek.
Yep, agreed. Our current plan, I'd like to say come back next week, but our current plan is we're going to alternate Prodigy and Voyager because we can't do 2 podcasts a week and also do our jobs. And also James is working really hard on his cosplay for Comic-Con, so he's quite busy. So we have a lot of stuff going on. So next week, we will be releasing a Star Trek Voyager episode. And then the week after, we will come back with episodes 3 and 4 of Star Trek Prodigy. If it bugs us that we're going so slow, who knows? Maybe we'll adapt and stop with Voyager for a while, but this is the current plan. So once again, I would say if you want to connect with us, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. You can also talk to us on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. We are on the different socials at ReBinge It. The name of this podcast is ReBinge It. You can subscribe to that and you will get all of our new content. So you will get the Prodigy podcast and you will get the Voyager podcast. So whatever we release, you will get. Or if you only care about Prodigy, but I don't know how you only care about Prodigy and not the rest of Star Trek, but there is an independent podcast and it is called Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBinge It podcast. I know it's confusing. Just subscribe to ReBinge It. That's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, just subscribe to ReBinge It. You know it makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBinge It podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.
And don't be a Borg.
And listen to Janeway.